I'm Denise Smith, and I provide overdose education and Narcan distribution throughout northern and down east Maine. And thank you for being here. This presentation is about 40 minutes long and covers how to use naloxone, drugs that impact overdose response, and myths and kind of facts and myths, and how to myth bust, I guess. And and then some resources, lots of resources, lots of links that I'll point out over the course of the presentation that you can take note of. Also, this presentation is overdose response from a Good Samaritan perspective, not a first responder perspective, and that is a important distinction. It's a guide. It's one person's guidance. Uh, I have done this for many years, and I've had the privilege of hearing lots of perspectives and stories and examples from lots of people with lived and living experience. And this is not in any way meant to negate anyone's stories or experiences. Again, this is just one person's guide, and I'm here to provide guidance in a limited amount of time, and with, the best I can with a limited amount of time. And I appreciate you taking that time. So that's why we're here today. And I'm glad to be here. I'm glad you're able to take that time. So let's just get into it. Maybe. Okay. So starting with the drug landscape, and there's three or more drugs in most overdoses, almost always fentanyl and something else. And almost always fentanyl is listed as the drug that the cause of death in the medical examiner's tox screens. The drug landscape is always changing. I've been doing this job for doing these presentations and this position for about 5 years, maybe a little over 5 years now. And when I first started doing it in about 2020, it's changed tremendously since that time. So it will continue to change. So I'll talk about that and reference that over the course of this presentation. We did see a slight decrease in fatal and non-fatal overdoses in 2024, which is great. But we also want to continue to stay vigilant because, at the height of the drug overdoses and drug deaths in 2020, we were already kind of at an all-time high prior to that. So continuing to stay vigilant in the work that we do, the fact that you're here learning how to continue to stay safe and save lives is incredibly important. So continuing to learn the changes and how we can adapt to the overdose crisis and what's happening, will continue to know that we can continue to save lives moving forward. And also knowing that most drug overdoses are accidental is incredibly important because people are not trying to die. People don't want to die. And recognizing that, especially in Maine, which I'll talk about later too, but in Maine, like 80% of people who have died in overdoses, most of them were accidental. I can talk about that too. But most of the information that I find, and I talk about I shouldn't say most, a lot of the information I find is at mainedrugdata.org. And Maine does a really great job of collecting information from fatal and non-fatal drug overdoses across the state and reports it out at mainedrugdata.org. If you like data, you can check it out there. They collect and report information, from first responders, from county information, the different kind of drugs that are discovered through tox screens. That information is there. You can check it out. It's released monthly, and then they do a cumulative report at the end of the year. Also, at the bottom of the screen is another long link that was reported at the end of 2024 that collects a series of reasons why the decrease in overdoses occurred in 2024, because it wasn't one reason why drug overdoses decreased. And Maine is also mentioned in that article, and you can check that out. But there's lots of reasons why, access to naloxone is mentioned, treatment, interdictions. There's lots of reasons there, but you can check that out at that link as well. So moving into fentanyl as the main increase in the overdose crisis and death and overdoses, non-fatal and fatal. Most people have heard of fentanyl. Again, it's found in most illicit drugs, about 80% of drugs deaths. It's been named as the cause of death. Some things that I hear often about fentanyl is that it's become like a super drug, that it no longer responds to naloxone because it's so strong. And uh, of note, fentanyl is an opioid. Naloxone, which we'll talk about in a few more slides, and how naloxone works, but naloxone is meant to reverse opioid overdoses. Fentanyl is an opioid, so yes, fentanyl does respond to naloxone. There's no naloxone resistant drug. People do not build up tolerance to naloxone. Fentanyl, there's no super, drug. So fentanyl will respond to naloxone. One really big myth that kind of ebbs and flows, has ebbed and flowed over the years, that you will hear, you will see on TV, you will again, another one that I stopped seeing for a while and now I'm seeing it again, is something that you can overdose by touching it. And there's a really great link at the bottom of the screen there that you can look and read extensively about the reasons why you cannot overdose by touching fentanyl. Again, you can respond to an overdose and feel safe, that you are safe from overdosing as well. And again, this is with the exception of children. Children's bodies work differently. They, in and around drugs, the way that they are, everything about a child's body is different than an adult's. So that's different. But as an adult person who is responding to an overdose in and around fentanyl or other drugs, you are safe to respond. Same with like if you entered a car and fentanyl powder, or a room where fentanyl was, you know, around, and it got disrupted and might have been in the air, you will not breathe it in. It doesn't hang around in the air. And, the fentanyl molecule is really heavy. So it doesn't hang around in the air. You won't breathe it in. And you will sometimes see that on TV, where someone on TV might walk into a room and then all of a sudden overdose. And that's not real. That doesn't happen. So again, that website at the bottom also partially, it kind of can cater to first responders on that website, but you can also go deeper into the website or to the link and read more about it. So it's a really good website. The other thing that fentanyl can cause, which does impact overdose response, is muscle rigidity. So it can cause the abdomen and area around the chest to get really heavy, really hard and rigid. It can cause clenched fist. It can cause rigid muscles or locked jaw, which I will talk about a little bit later. All of those things can happen from fentanyl. Something else that there's no data to support, which I won't spend a lot of time on, because again, there's another great website there that you can check out if you want to, is fentanyl-laced cannabis. This is sort of this myth that comes up over and over again about, cannabis that's laced with fentanyl and causes overdose. There is no data to support this. There's lots of reasons why it doesn't work that way. Cannabis doesn't work that way. But if you really, think about this and reason it out, it just doesn't make sense, because of a number of people who use cannabis or smoke marijuana, and the fact that overdose rates are dropping. Those things don't kind of line up. So if just the small percentage of people, with the number of people who use cannabis, and the number of people, and the fact that overdose rates are dropping, and that, like, even if 1% of the people or 10% of the people using, marijuana were to overdose, we would see overdose rates just be skyrocketing, and that's not happening. So that alone is, when you think about the reason behind that, that alone speaks to the fact that there's no data to support that fentanyl laced cannabis idea. The other reasons are there as well. Also want to point you to the QR code at the bottom of the screen talking about a harm reduction resource of retail market cannabis versus medical cannabis and the regulation of adult market cannabis versus the medical cannabis. So adult market cannabis is much more regulated than medical marijuana. So you can read more about that as well. So another drug that's in the landscape right now that's really impacting overdose response is xylazine and other emerging substances that are similar to xylazine. And most people have heard of fentanyl, but fewer people have heard about xylazine and these similar substances. So I say similar substances because as you know, more people become more aware, or as like agencies and people intervening on these drugs become more aware of xylazine, and it becomes kind of um, as they take it off the market, I guess, or take it away, or because it becomes more regulated, I guess is what I want to say. More emerging substances to supplement it uh, become available. So they make more drugs to replace it. And that I know less about those emerging substances, but I know more about xylazine. So I'm going to talk about xylazine. And as I learn more about the emerging substances to replace it, I'll update the presentation. But what I know about xylazine is that it's a really powerful sedative. It's what basically a veterinary tranquilizer. It's added to fentanyl, so it's called trank or zombie dope, and it's added to fentanyl and other drugs. It's not typically used alone. What we know now is it's not used alone. People don't go out and seek xylazine only or get xylazine only. It's added to fentanyl to extend the high of fentanyl. It's found in other drugs because it's added to fentanyl, and fentanyl is found in other drugs. So it causes heavy sedation. It impacts overdose response. Sorry, because it affects the appearance of an overdose and the reversal of an overdose. And I'll talk about that when I get to those slides, but that's an important distinction. It also can cause severe skin wounds. And I say xylazine there in parentheses because I know that about xylazine. I don't know about the other emerging substances, but I know xylazine causes skin wounds, not like cellulitis, like can be at a injection site. It doesn't matter if you inject the drugs. It can be a smoke drug, a snorted drug. It doesn't matter. If there's xylazine in the drugs, then it can cause a skin wound. And it basically is like a necrotic skin wound that can be an open sore that is like a skin eating sore. And again, you can Google those, just Google a xylazine skin wound, and you can see how severe and dangerous they can be if they're not treated. They are treatable. There's some information there on those links at the bottom of the screen. One is information about xylazine, one is information about treating xylazine wounds, but there's good information there that you can learn more. Oh, and xylazine is not an opioid. So xylazine doesn't get reversed by naloxone. So it won't naloxone won't reverse a xylazine overdose. But xylazine again is used in fentanyl, which is an opioid. So using naloxone on a fentanyl overdose, even if there's xylazine in it, will still help to reverse that overdose. So when an opioid overdose occurs, opioids bind to these receptors in the brain. The receptors affect the part of the brain that signals that body to breathe. So when an overdose occurs, it's like this toxic amount of chemicals enter the body, this wave of drugs come in, and as a defense mechanism, the brain shuts down those brain receptors. And then what happens is like the breathing slows down, the breathing stops, the heart slows, and then that person dies. And so it's like these stages. And when I first started doing this, again, 2020, we would say you have time, but you don't have time to waste. But now with fentanyl, or since fentanyl came in, a little later than 2020, it was like, you don't have time. And now that we've added xylazine into the mix, it's like you don't have time. And then you also have an increased, it's always been a respiratory emergency. An overdose has always been a respiratory emergency because the brain is shutting down the respiratory, your lungs, your breathing. But the increased respiratory reduction of xylazine has increased the respiratory emergency of this situation. So we'll talk about the importance of rescue breathing a little bit later as well. The added importance. So naloxone. Or Narcan. And now that naloxone has become over the counter, you're seeing like increased generic brands of naloxone. And the picture there is the generic. For a long time, it was only Narcan. You would only see Narcan, or if you could get the if you got intramuscular naloxone, you could get this as the generic, but we only train with nasal naloxone or nasal Narcan, which we only have that we oh, can you see this? So these boxes will look different because we did just get a new vendor and we'll be getting generic naloxone as our supply pretty soon. They're purple boxes. But naloxone works by knocking those opioids off the brain receptors. So it knocks them off and blocks them for 30 to 90 minutes. And that 30 to 90 minutes just basically depends on the person's body metabolism. So that individual person's body metabolism. It takes at least 2 minutes to start working. So when you see on TV that someone is reversing an overdose with naloxone or Narcan, and the person gets the hit of naloxone, and then that person immediately wakes up, that is not real. It does take at least 2 minutes, sometimes 3 minutes to work. So it takes time to work. And I'll talk about that when we get to those steps as well. It is 100% safe to use. You can use it on people who are pregnant or nursing, someone who's a child, pets. We've had reports of it being used on dogs and cats. So it is 100% safe to use. You can use it on someone who is experiencing a health event that is not an overdose, but sort of could look like an overdose, or you're not sure that it's an overdose, and maybe they're having a heart event, and some of the symptoms might mimic some of those of an overdose. And so you might give them, naloxone just in case. It won't do anything. It would just be like squirting water up their nose. So it is 100, you can't hurt someone by giving them naloxone and they're not overdosing. And I think that's really important to help for someone who is not, new to this and is not sure. Like that was one of the first things that I asked when I first was trained to do this before I started working here. I don't want to hurt anyone. So you're safe to do that. The other thing that's important is that it does have a 4-year expiration date. So there is an expiration date on the box, but it does not expire. It will work well beyond the expiration date. And I wouldn't say that unless I had data to back it up. And there is a great, that's highlighted in purple, that website right there at the bottom of the slide. It's like 30 years or so. I don't think it starts to degrade until 27 years. So you can use it well beyond its expiration date. It doesn't really, it's very hardy. It doesn't endurable. It can be exposed to heat. It can be exposed to cold. You can keep it in your car, in your trunk, all of those things, and it still will work. So you don't have to worry about that. I mean, the recommended storage temperature is 56 to 77 degrees, but again, as long as it's not frozen, it will work. So you're safe to keep it in those places. You're safe to put it in your medicine cabinet and not worry about it for until you need it. So don't throw it away because again, it is expensive. Like when we first started getting it, it was like $75 a box. Now if you buy it, you can get it at the store for 33, but if not, you don't have to throw it away. You can keep it and not worry about its effectiveness. It will work. So there's also other information here at the bottom about the different brands. There's different brands of naloxone or other overdose prevention or overdose medications that you can use. And some of them are different, work differently than others. And there's also a website there at the bottom of the screen where you can research some of that on your own as well. Naloxone's only purpose is to reverse an opioid overdose. So you can use it, it's safe. So moving into the signs of overdose, there's many signs of overdose. There may be no signs of overdose. I like to point people to, again, the bottom of the screen there, harmreduction.org, and they will give you lots of, like a great explanation and description and like information about those different signs. Obviously, I can't go through all of them here, but I like to focus on the blue, gray, purple fingernails or lips, and the slow breathing, gurgling, wheezing. And at the bottom, very unique or unusual gasping for breath. So it's something that has been described as something you've never heard before. And those are the two in this sort of climate that we're in with the xylazine situation that I like to kind of focus on for this presentation, I guess. And there's others, obviously, unresponsive to voice or touch, slow or regular heartbeat, pinpoint-sized pupils, clammy, vomiting, seizure. You see those on TV as well. So moving into the steps in overdose, the first step is to, look around, just make sure your area is safe, then check for a response. You don't want to like bend over on glass or needles or anything like that so you can check out the area and then get to that person and check for a response. So shake their shoulders, shout their name, rub your knuckles on their sternum, try to get some kind of a physical response from them to see if they're responding to you. Are they awake? And when I first started doing this, that was kind of the thing, like either they're awake or they're not awake, and then that's how you dictate whether you move to the next step. Now, because of xylazine, that person might not be overdosing. They might just be really, really sedated. So checking for some of those other things. So do they have color in their face? Are they blue or gray or purple? Can you feel for a heartbeat or breath? Are they moving around? So some of those other kind of signs before you move straight to naloxone, right straight to giving them naloxone, because that xylazine can impact that person's ability to respond to any kind of stimulation. Because you don't want to Narcan them. You don't want to give them naloxone if they don't need it. So then these two steps are right on the same screen because as we say before, time is of the essence here. So if there's two people, ideally there's two people, someone can give them the naloxone and someone can call 911 at the same time. If not, then you decide what you feel most comfortable doing. So if you feel comfortable just moving straight to naloxone, then you can go straight to the naloxone and start that and then call 911. If you feel better having 911 on the phone who can then walk you through the steps and can, talk you through it, then that's absolutely fine and completely up to you and okay. So either call 911 or spray one dose of naloxone. So I'm going to show you the naloxone. As I said, I showed you this, it's so weird that I showed you this box. There are still some of these smaller boxes, which I don't know why that's doing that. won't show you both. Okay. So this is the smaller box here. This was the prescription box of the smaller box was the prescription box before it went over the counter. There are directions on both boxes. On the smaller box, it's on the front where you can open it up and look if that makes you feel more comfortable to have directions to look at. On the bigger box, it's on the back. On the back. Let's see here. Back here. So you'll open up the box, and inside the box, there are two of these packs. They look like this. You're just going to peel the back of the pack, and inside those packs are two little devices. So you'll get this little nasal device, take that device, put it right up to that person's nostril, and press the plunger. You'll press that plunger. That medicine will go right up into that person's nose, just like when you're using your Flonase or whatever in the morning. That medicine will go up into that person's nose, and the medicine will deploy and start to absorb, and then go into that person's body and start to do its job. Once you do that, then you'll go to the next step. If you don't have naloxone, then you can just go to this step, and that is rescue breathing. And rescue breathing is you'll plug their nose and tilt their head back and give one normal sized breath every five seconds for 2 to 3 minutes. So that's rescue breathing only, no chest compressions. And that's when I say it's a Good Samaritan response and not first responder response. And that is simply because, remember, I mentioned earlier that the chest and the jaw can get locked and hard from the fentanyl, causing this, wooden chest response. You only really need to get that oxygen into that person to get them breathing. They need oxygen. They need oxygen is most important. So getting them those rescue breaths for 2 to 3 minutes is the most important thing they need at that point, more important than chest compressions. So if for some reason you can't open their jaw because of the fentanyl causing their jaw to lock, then you can do those rescue breaths through their nose. So you'll cover their mouth with your hand and get that lock over their mouth, over their nose. Instead of getting that good mouth lock over their lips, you'll get that lock over their nose and provide those breaths over their nose instead, for 2 to 3 minutes. And after that time, as that medicine works through their system, their muscles will loosen up so that you can then hopefully give the breaths the regular way. So sometimes people are like, I'm not doing that, Denise. I maybe I don't know that person, whatever. I'm not comfortable doing that. Rescue breathing is such an important part because of the respiratory depression in general, but then also the added respiratory depression of the xylazine creates that increased respiratory depression of that person. So it's the increased need to, for that oxygen is just extra important during this time. So we've started, many first aid kits have the oxygen, squeezy things or some kind of a mouth guard that you can use to provide, rescue breaths already. We started giving out face shields. They come in these little packs, and then when you open it up, it looks like this. So it goes over your face and mouth here. You can see that. Here, if you don't have a face shield, then you can really use anything as a shield over your face, some kind of a barrier for your mouth so that if you don't feel comfortable with skin to skin contact, you can use a t-shirt for that. You can use a piece of paper that you put holes in. You can use a plastic bag from your lunchbox or from your, car. whatever you can do to get that, barrier between your mouth and that person's mouth and still be able to provide those breaths is anything you can use for PPE. Because obviously, when we first started doing this, that was a major concern for some people because we were at the height of COVID. So that was a secondary concern to providing rescue breathing, and it's totally understandable. So if you don't have a rescue breath, I mean, if you don't have a face shield, then you can use some other form of a PPE to provide those rescue breaths. So after you've done that for 2 to 3 minutes, then you can check for a response. So some people will wake up. And that was, 5 years ago, that was it. That was what happened. That person woke up and you knew that the overdose had been reversed. But now xylazine can sort of depress that response. So you don't know necessarily that overdose has been reversed. So we can't use awareness or consciousness as that determination for the reversal. So you'll check in other ways. Is the color returning? Can you see that they're breathing? Can you see that their heart is beating? Are they showing other signs of life? So check that. And then if not, then you'll give a second dose of naloxone. There's a second dose in the box, and you'll go through the same process and then give it in their opposite nostril if possible. And that's just not for any reason other than perhaps the, first dose didn't make it where it needed to go. Maybe there was some damage, maybe there's some blockage in there, whatever, just in case. You'll give it in the second nostril and then resume rescue breathing for another 2 to 3 minutes. If they do wake up, then you can put that person on their side and then just to be safe, put them on their side in the recovery position. I've lost my phone. In the recovery position and wait for EMS to arrive. And then hopefully after, if you do have to give a second dose and you've done the 2 to 3 minutes and you're doing those rescue breaths after 2 to 3 minutes, then EMS will have arrived after that time. So back, just to review, check for a response, try to wake that person up, shake their shoulders, shout their name, rub your knuckles on their sternum, on their upper lip, check for, are they awake? Are they not? Are they blue? Give a dose of naloxone spray or call 911 or vice versa. And then start those rescue breaths. Do that for 2 to 3 minutes. Check if it's working. If it's not working, then you'll give that second dose. If it is, then you'll put that person in the recovery position until EMS arrives and watch and make sure they're okay until EMS arrives. Aftercare. So this is also a lot of times people will say, oh, well, be careful because that person's gonna get up and punch you. And this is where I'm usually like, okay, well, number one, there's no adrenaline in naloxone. I've also heard that question this is where that adrenaline is gonna come up. There's no adrenaline in naloxone. Naloxone does not inherently make anybody violent or aggressive. Sometimes people will not remember overdosing. They will not, admit to having overdosed. They won't remember overdosing. They won't know what happened. They might wake up and feel scared. This is a situation where just trying to keep that person calm, tell them what happened. You overdosed, I had to Narcan you, you're safe, you're okay. Be prepared for any kind of reaction because anyone can have any reaction in any situation, and someone doesn't have to have overdosed in order for anyone to have a trauma response. And if you start to think about being in that situation, especially if you don't have great experiences with the police or with the, EMS or with first responders, and then waking up with lots of people around you and not knowing, what happened, anyone can overreact strongly. So just be prepared, try to make that a calm situation, keep yourself safe, and then try to keep that person safe so that everybody can be calm and understand. I tell everybody all the time that if you've ever watched any of my presentations, you've probably heard it. If you've been to a second presentation of mine, you'll hear it again. But my husband, if I wake him up in the recliner after he's fallen asleep, if I touch him, he will wake up and lash out. And that's his trauma response because he has one. And it has nothing to do with him being naloxone or him overdosing. It's just his trauma response, and anyone can have one. So just be prepared for that. Okay, almost done. Risk factors, and I mentioned it at the beginning of the presentation. There's lots of risk factors for someone overdosing, and these are just a few. There's even more than this. You can find more of those at harmreduction.org if you went to that website. I point out the using alone one because, again, as evidence on mainedrugdata.org, we know that in Maine, like 80% of overdoses, especially fatal overdoses, link back to someone using alone. And so we do have resources for people who feel like they have to use alone, and this is one of them. And it's called the Safe Use Hotlines. This is Safe Spot, and there's another one called Never Use Alone. And basically, the person, if they're going to use drugs alone, they call this number or they go on the website or whatever. And the person on the other end gets their information, they get their location, the person uses their drugs, and if there's no response after the person uses the drugs, then the person on the other end of the line at the hotline will then call EMS to go to the site. And so it's just a way, it's harm reduction, it's a way to save lives. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to save lives. And last screen, this is a bunch of resources local to Maine and the different counties in Maine, statewide, local resources, statewide resources. I usually point out Maine Access Points, who provides a syringe service program across the state with lots of additional resources in addition to just syringe services. Know your options liaisons there's more than one in each county now, and they can get you naloxone. They can also provide resources and access to treatment. They can help drive you to treatment if that's what you need. So if you reach out to them, then you can get a variety of different options with the options liaisons. And then mainedrugdata.org, I already pointed out, and then some national resources. I did point out harmreduction.org. The other one is nextdistro.org resources, which has lots of different resources that are not just, drug related resources. You can find tobacco, alcohol, intimate violence, safe sex, lots of different resources there at your fingertips. If you needed to find something, if you wanted to post something, there's all kinds of information there. And this is my information. If anyone is interested, why don't you reach out? If you have questions, if you have feedback, if there's something you'd like to share, I'm happy to take that information. Please share it. Anything you have, if you need anything, please feel free to do that. If you made it this far, I appreciate it. And I hope that you found something helpful here. Thank you so much.